the purpose of the brush on the first coat is really just to transfer the epoxy from the can to the boat. So it isn't about painting. People who are the best painters have the hardest time getting the epoxy on fast. So the brush is really, just to transfer. When we get to the last coat, that's going to be more the painting. Squeegees. This whole piece of yellow plastic is really the key to a very clean coat and very little sanding to get there. It's just a piece of plastic, but what it does is controls the film and thickness of the resin that's left behind in the cloth after the wood has had a good drink. One of the problems we have is we can't just put on a continuous amount of epoxy over the whole surface, because each of these pieces of cedar here is going to absorb a varying amount of the epoxy. So I think we mentioned that that the dark stuff seems to soak it up faster than the light stuff. So that means we have to put on enough that all those pieces have a good drink, and then scrape off all the excess. So this is the tool to do it with. And you try to keep the edge without nicks. If you get a nick, take your block plane and take the sliver off of it, and that'll clean that right up. Because if there is a nick and you scrape down here, leaves a little track behind. Rags, best rag would be like an old cotton sheet or pillowcase that have been washed a whole bunch of times. Means the lint is out of it. You'll avoid using colors, because the lacquer thinner will dissolve the color in your rag and transfer that to your boat. So white, cotton, synthetics really don't absorb the way they should, so cotton is the best. When you wipe the boat down, fold your rag up nice and neat. Put a little bit of thinner on here. Purpose of the thinner is not to wash the boat, it's just to hold the dust onto your rag. So you wipe back and forth until this side is all charged up. Then you turn it over and you have a fresh side. When that's all charged up, you turn it over. So this way you always have a fresh face. If this was in a ball, you'd just be kind of moving all that dust around. You wouldn't be systematically picking it up. So we're talking about using the squeegee to pick up all the excess resin. Once you get it on your squeegee, you got to do something with it, or you reach up and you transfer it back to where you started. So we have this handy dandy little idea here. If I'm going to be famous for anything, it's going to be for my juice can trick. So the water then is going to be in here. This can here is going to have lacquer thinner in it. When you're finished using with your brush, scrape it off on the edge of the water container. You have to get as much out as you can, and then we'll soak it in the can with the lacquer thinner. I prefer latex. It fits nice. The vinyl ones, people wouldn't be allergic to that, but there's no stretch to it. You're dead. Your fingers always getting caught in something. So, this would be my preference. And we have some nitrile someplace. So these aren't bad either as a heavy duty glove. You can try those if you want. They have a deep cuff on them. So they do give you some protection up here. As a solvent for the epoxy, the Lacquer Thinner is my first choice. It's easy to find. It's not too expensive. And it smells nasty enough that you don't forget that it's a toxic chemical. Of all the materials we're using here today, I think the Lacquer Thinner is probably the most hazardous because everything that comes out of the can ends up in the air, the air that we're breathing. Whereas the epoxy, there'd be an odor, but there's nothing evaporating. There's nothing out of that epoxy can that's going up in the air other than smell. That said, you do want to have good ventilation and everything, but anything that evaporates is going to be a bigger hazard than